Hi, and welcome to today's webcast, Mad Skills in the Government House, Reskilling and Upskilling Your Employees. This is the second installment in our series we're exploring on the future of work. I'm Phil Bertolini. I'm the co-director of the Center for Digital Government, and I'm excited to serve as the host for today's webcast. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a great session over the next 30 minutes. Now, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to show up on your screen so you can check those out. But also during today's webcast, you'll be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn and Twitter. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag GovLive or hashtag GovTechLive to share key takeaways, quotes, and learnings from today's webcast. At the close of the webinar, we encourage you to complete a brief survey. We'd like to hear what you think. If you're unable to stay with us for the entire webinar, but would like to complete the survey as much as you're able, please click the survey widget at the bottom of the screen to launch the survey. Otherwise, it will pop up once the webinar concludes. All right, so joining me today to discuss this topic are Mike Leahy, CIO for the state of Maryland, and Rob Lloyd, the CIO for the city of San Jose, California. Mike is responsible for information technology, data processing, telecommunications, and systems procurement, planning, and management for the executive branch of state government. Rob directs the diverse technology portfolio of the nation's 10th largest municipality. Over the past 2 decades, he has held C-level roles in technology, government, and utility sector in California, Arizona, Oregon, and Colorado. So before we get started, first of all, welcome Mike, welcome Rob. Before we get started with the discussion though, we would like to do a poll question. So I'm gonna go ahead and launch the poll and you'll see it on your screen. What are your plans to resume normal, centralized contact center operations within your agency post-pandemic? First selection is we will remain a fully remote contact center now that we've made the transition. We will resume 100% operations on site with 0 remote agents. We will employ a hybrid flexible schedule where employees will return to the office but have the flexibility to work from home, or we're uncertain and we are still exploring our options. The reason we wanted to start here is we all understand that the pandemic changed everything and that there was this push to move remote. I myself am a former CIO. I was the CIO for Oakland County, Michigan. And we never had to deal with taking all of our employees and pushing them out to remote sites. You all have. But what's government going to look like? What's the future of that workplace going to look like for you and your entities, right? So I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple more seconds to answer the question. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share the results. So here we go. All right, panelists, look what we got here. So we have a lot of folks that are still exploring what their options are, 50.9%. 43.4% said it's going to be a flexible. So at some point, there's going to be people working remotely from government, and they're going to have to plan effectively. And then you have a small percentage that said we will remain a fully remote contact center that we've made the transition. Excellent information. Thank you all for sharing that. So what I'd like to do now, though, is I'd like to get our discussion started. So I'd like to welcome in Mike and Rob to the talk here. And guys, you know, up front, you have to, you're going to have to plan for the right skill sets that you need, right? You're going to need the right people to be able to do the right job at the right time for you. So have you assessed your current teams, and did you learn anything that surprised you in that assessment? And Rob, let's go to you first.
Yeah, so we've actually had a very concerted approach, all managed through our Emergency Operations Center, and have a deputy city manager and now another deputy city manager, formerly our chief of staff, who've really led the effort and was all focused around compassionate action, saving lives and livelihoods as part of that. We said we're going to be open, honest, and direct with each other. And around that was the human part of it. And so we talked about what our folks were doing and what they needed, the operations and continuing that, as well as the emergency response. And throughout from the start, what this new normal we were building towards would look like both in response and then in recovery. And there's been a lot of contributors, but one of the sections we actually created in our Emergency Operations Center is what we call the Powered by People 2.0, what are all the things that we're going to have to do to create this new normal effectively? Everything from facilities improvements to policies to the budget actions to management skills that you're talking about. Taking that into the IT department and how we're approaching it and approaching it with peers is we see it as kind of three levels. One is the operationals. What do people have the tools and can get their work done? There's the collaboration and new normals of work in terms of how we work together and collaborate. That has changed, and we use different tools and have different rituals around that now. And then the longer term is culture, which is how are we making sure that we're building a culture that's going to be highly productive, that's going to support and reinforce people, and is going to serve the public in the ways that we ambition it to. So all those things have taken a lot of work and honestly a lot of investment. Some of the CARES CRF funds have helped out, a lot of conversations with our budget folks. But the honest truth also is we're still teaching ourselves how to get through this. And the management skills is one of those vectors that we're still focused on, making sure that we know how to lead teams in this new environment and can be effective in it, and that we're perceiving our employees and making sure they're healthy and well.
Rob, thanks for that. And Mike, before you jump in here, I also want to mention to the audience out there that we're going to try to take some questions from the audience towards the end of the session. We're only here for 30 minutes, but if you go ahead and put some questions into the Q&A, we'll go ahead and try to entertain those towards the latter part of the session. Mike, what are your thoughts here?
Oh, thank you, Phil. Let me correct something. I'm glad you gave me so much power in Maryland, but Maryland is still a federated state in the sense that we have many agencies that have larger IT staffs than my entire organization. So our principal shift, because of dealing with this new normal, was, as Rob said, like he had, we got people into a routine using different tools to work remotely. And we're looking at the efficiencies that can be brought to bear, because the beauty of the pandemic is folks are suddenly far more open to asking each other questions that didn't talk to each other when they were not working remotely. Within an office like ours, I have lost a lot of the impact of the input I had from just walking around and talking to people every day. And we're looking at culturally how to shift that. But the biggest change in terms of skill sets is we're actually now working far harder to figure out how to reach out to the agencies that are public facing, whereas most of our work is internal and providing services to various operational agencies, and getting them seeing us as the partner that provides the tools that will allow them to do their business processes more efficiently and to analyze their work more effectively. And that leads to a whole different set of skill sets than you normally expect from people in the technology field, because they are now more interested in understanding the business processes and looking at the return on investment and the economics of it and the impact on citizens than necessarily whether a particular piece of equipment serves those needs most efficiently for them. And that's been a huge change. It's going to take a year or two to go through, I'm certain, but that is one of the silver linings that's come out of this pandemic.
Mike, thank you for that. So guys, having the right skill sets is important. And having the knowledge of where those skill sets are is very important as you move forward. So Mike, stay with me here for a second. Do you have the right resources that you need to go ahead and move towards the future? And if you do, what kind of training or what kind of work are you putting into them to grow those skill sets internally?
Certainly. Well, we partially have the right skill sets, and we've gotten a commitment from the governor to add the sets of skills that we need, which primarily, as I said, go to reaching out to these agencies. We have created what we call a position of portfolio officers that report directly to me, that each of them has a portfolio of agencies that aligns with the governor's deputy chiefs of staff portfolio. and we are attempting to, again, build cross-agency efficiencies because, folks in the environmental portfolio have lots of the same problems but haven't talked to each other before. So the biggest tools we are looking to add that aren't the management skills have far more to do with business intelligence and RPA and robotic processing automation, so that we can take away ministerial tasks and give people more time to actually think about the work they're doing.
Excellent, Mike. Rob, what are your thoughts there?
So we actually manage in a portfolio fashion as well. So we have a practice called Services Skills Matrix. So across the X-axis and across the Y-axis, X is all the services that we have. It could be a business system, could be business analysis. And then on the Y-axis are the skills, discrete skills that actually go into that. And so the first look you get is, here's everything I have and what I need to keep it operational. And the managers say, I need to be this deep. And you can see one skill in multiple portfolios or multiple services that we render, that they pop up multiple times. So you know that you need to be deeper there. The next thing we do is when we add a new service, like say when we partnered with Zoom in 2017, early 2018, said, all right, we're going to prepare for this because one day we're going to need to make a big push to remote work. And little did we know. But that's a new skill. And we had some people pick it up, and the public meeting side of it, plus the internal side of it, the webinar components, public outreach meetings. So we built up skills that way. And then so as we have new needs, we can perceive what we have to invest in how we get that skill. The nuance to it, though, is some of the skills that we're trying to pick up now in terms of how we teach our managers to be very effective as remote managers, how we teach our teams to be better as remote teams versus the highly physical interfaces that we had before. That's been harder, and we've had to come up with some of our own training. But through the EOC, through the budget process, similar to Mike, we're getting the support that we need to invest in it as soon as we advocate for it. And the other nuance I'll tell you that's very positive is the pandemic has collapsed a lot of traditional barriers. No one's saying this is mine, this is yours. Right. But we're all saying, what does it take to take care of the community, take care of our employees? And so we've been able to ask for things in concert with each other with almost no dissension. And it's very effective. It's a lesson in the budget process. When you go together, your chances of success are way higher. And when you agree on something, that investment can translate into something powerful more quickly.
So Rob, did leadership buy in right away? I mean, was this something where, the leadership just had their arms around it right away and you were able to move forward? Or was this something that they also had to be educated a bit to get there?
Well, I'll give credit to our leadership, from our city manager, Dave Sykes, Jennifer, our assistant city manager, the two people who are leading the EOC. That communication with the Emergency Operations Center, the city manager's office, and across our departments, seamless. And there's been actually a paper on our EOC, Emergency Operations Center, how we ran it, and how we continue to run it. It's been in sync from the start. And so open, candid, and direct conversation means the conversation goes all ways and no one's offended. Because we're focused on the right thing. And so from the beginning, our EOC directors were like, hey, we need to take care of our people. From the beginning, our city manager and assistant city manager and council and mayor were saying, we got to take care of our people and take care of our community at the same time. And our department directors and our leaders all the way through the supervisory level were saying, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm meeting, here's what I'm having a hard time with. So it's one of those moments in your career where you're like, man, everything really came together and people are speaking with one voice.
Excellent, Rob. Thanks for sharing that. So, Mike, let's talk about the team a little bit, okay? Because building the team is one thing, and there's significant costs and people power into getting the right team on board. But it's another thing to nurture them and to grow them and to continue to invest in them. How are you planning to manage the well-being of your staff? I always worry about wellness and people. How are you managing that?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. I mean, it's funny because if you think about the position of a manager, in my view, folks who get it wrong think their team works for them. And those of us that are trying to do it in a way we hope is right is we know we work for our team. So obviously, making certain that they are healthy, that they have the resources that they need, that you delegate to them in a way that they know they have the authority and autonomy to do their job well, but you're willing to step in if they need help, leads to, in our case, a lot more one-on-one conversations with people further down in the organization than one would normally think the secretary would reach. I talk to all levels of managers, and once a week talk to a group of employees from each group. And amazingly, most folks in a group show up. So in our largest operating groups, we have 25, 30 people, and all 25 to 30 of them will come and are very vocal. So it's worked well. The other piece of that, very quickly, because I know we're very limited on time, is we're approaching how people think about their jobs rather differently. And, typically you're pulled in 10 directions at once. And so I highly recommend adopting a theorem by a fellow named Cal Newport, who's a computer scientist at Georgetown, wrote a book called Deep Work, and talks about how to look at what it is you're attempting to accomplish more thoroughly and then work toward that.
Mike, thank you. Rob, your point of view on that, with the well-being and the wellness of your team.
Yeah, so as you try to ease the work, and it's really relevant because as we define this new hybrid, it has to be flexible enough, and we're having to answer the questions that you're talking about. So there are things that you can do and approaches, and there's actually a whole discipline in emergency management and disaster recovery around speaking to the well-being and taking care of your people, especially over time. The patterns shift over time on how people wear down, how they express things differently, how you need to manage that. And that 6 to 7 month time frame is actually one of those big windows where exhaustion starts to set in. And if you can get through that, then actually it's more of an upswing. But for us, if you can bring up that slide I sent you, Phil.
You bet. There you go, Rob.
Yeah, for us, this is our Powered by People 2.0 objectives, and we've been very intentional through our Emergency Operations Center about this. And we said, if we're going to really build that next normal, and it's going to be supportive of all of our people and take care of a culture that's going to have to evolve but be very effective at the same time, it is going to consist of these 4 things. So we've got to make sure the workplace is safe, and that's a lot of facilities improvements and the shields, elevators, routines, stairways only go one way now. There's employee health and wellness that they're taking care of, childcare when they're struggling with that, making sure that we have the rules in place that they can work in the right place, and make sure the risks are managed with whatever is in their family setting. And then on the work piece, there's 2 components that IT is really driving as part of this, which is shift everything to digital and make it easier and elegant. So it's few steps, easy to find people, easy to find things, and give them the tools through which they can work together, and that helps them. So, Phil, I'll be honest with you, is we still have a lot to figure out on how we make sure that we're taking care of well-being. I don't want to mislead anyone, but the tools we're looking for now is how do we know when someone's been on teleconference sessions for 13 hours in a day, that's unhealthy. How do we coach them otherwise? For the managers, most of the research we've seen is it's about connecting and making sure you're representing the work and you're balancing it with the people, and you're not treating them like cogs. If you try, the research says generally your team's going to be better off. If you don't try at all, that's the only scenario where your team starts falling apart and getting hurt. So that the Drive to Digital Effective Teams piece is something we're focusing a lot on. But the safe workplace, and employee health and wellness are components that we said they can't be separated. And this is one portfolio of taking care of our organization.
Excellent. Rob, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for providing this graphic information as well here. So, all right, so believe it or not, the questions are flying in, guys. So what I want to do is I want to go to some audience questions because I think they're important. There was a kind of a brief one to ask Rob. I'm not sure. Do you know if California is a federated model at the state level?
So Amy Tong is the state CIO, and the departments do have a lot of authority. I can't speak for them if you would qualify them as federated. I would say they seem to be decentralized in some places from my interactions with them. CPUC and other groups that we work with, they kind of do their own thing. But I think she does provide a lot of strategic and resource guidance across the entire state. Here at the city, we are decentralized and federated in some sense. So my powers are over budget, IT budgets, procurement, and major personnel actions. But we have departments that we give space to actually be fairly independent and responsive to their own portfolios.
Rob, thank you for that. Mike, I have a question for you that came in. It's about how are organizations currently working with staff that want to work in another state other than the one that they are headquartered or located in? Do you have any thoughts there?
Well, given the proof is in the pudding with regard to remote work, I think that is a wonderful idea, because although talent may be spread geographically fairly evenly, opportunity isn't. So to the extent that there are people that want to live in a rural area or whatever, that's different than these large city sorts of conglomerates where we find most of this type of work, I think that presents wonderful opportunities both for those potential employees and for the organization. The difficulty that arises, of course, is that you want to focus, first of all, on people that are committed to the state, as we are a state organization. And the politics of that leads one to certainly reach out to people in the jurisdiction first. But to the extent folks want to work remotely and want to work with other areas, I think it's a great idea and we should explore it more.
Excellent. Rob, another question came in, and I think it's perfect for you. It says, how has the investment flexed with the requirement for security of information and public trust with everything that we've been talking about here?
Yeah, actually, it's a powerful question. And actually, let me just speak to the previous one. One comment is we're still figuring out how we pay people across multiple states. When we have people who are technically residents of others, we have some work to do there. But on your question, Phil, the security piece is something we started from the initial point where as soon as we assigned everyone to work from home in March, there was the VPN and CASB support that we had to do to make sure that would work and that would work securely. We had some contracts in flight where we signed up a VSOC, a Virtual Security Operations Center, to monitor things at a deeper level than we've been able to before. Worked with Microsoft to make sure we're reading and closing off some holes that were less risky before, but your risk and vulnerability do increase, right? Risk is vulnerabilities times threats. And when you put so many points outside of the city network, your vulnerabilities have grown exponentially in some ways, and the threats have increased too. We've seen more attacks of certain varieties. So our CISO and I have been scrambling, and in our CRF funding, the Drive to Digital Empowered by People budget ask, there's security components in all of those. So I won't go any deeper because we have a saying here, what happens in cybersecurity stays in cybersecurity. We don't like to publish too much our specific plays, but it's been a major focus under the hood of everything that we've done because of that risk calculation, and we couldn't ignore it.
Rob, thank you. Mike, another question that came in here says, how do you monitor engagement and make certain that processes are being completed in this environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, that goes to automating a number of processes so that people are inputting data once, and we can see the actual output from various actions on a daily basis because of the way the data flows. The other piece of that, though, again, goes to this very human idea of talking through what people are doing with greater regularity. And because a number of our folks are now engaged very specifically with talking with their counterparts in other agencies, I get lots of reports about what problems they're facing. And obviously, I get to interact with their management too, and so we have a far more collaborative set of relationships than we've had historically. As Rob said, folks are more interested in getting the right things done than owning it at this point.
Rob, what are your thoughts there? How do you measure that the work is really getting done?
Yeah, and this might be somewhat different for San Jose because we're in the middle of Silicon Valley. We have a lot of Scrum approach here across multiple departments. And so we have Scrum of Scrums for executives, the team Scrums, the Emergency Operations Center that we have, all Scrum based. And so applying the Agile method, you see in your sprints of week, 2 weeks, and some teams 3 weeks, what needs to be done, who's getting it done, and where things are falling down. Some of that flows through to the EOC, some of it flows to departments, and it's pretty transparent what's getting done and what's not getting done. The translation layer is how the managers are doing that, and sometimes engaging HR where an employee seems to have disengaged, and how do you and treat them back and give them the help that they need. But the one thing I will say that we resist is there has been occasional questions to say, how do we really put the screws to this, and how do we have productivity tools to watch each employee and what they're doing and when they're doing it? And we've said absolutely not to those three managers who've asked and said that's not the method. We're not here to discipline people that way. Management is you lift them up and you deliver those goals based on what you've committed to and their interaction across boundaries. But we're not going to be the ones that are looking over everyone's shoulder all the time. And our HR department, to their credit, said, yeah, that's in no one's best interest. If there's a disciplinary issue, we'll activate that for a disciplinary issue, but that's not the baseline of our culture.
Excellent, Rob. Thank you. We have one quick question because we're only about 4 minutes to go here, but the question came in. I'm a 20-year IT analyst looking to upskill. Would you view micro certifications like business analysis as viable? Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Very useful.
Rob, your thoughts there?
Yeah, especially in the moment. But I think even more powerful is if you connect in with the right team needing to solve a problem, you don't even need a certification. Like we're not going to wait for the cert to come in. If we need people who are smart to solve a problem with us, plug in, you're welcome, and let's do good work.
Right. To Rob's point, attitude is more important. You can learn skills.
And that goes back to culture, right, guys? I mean, you talked about culture early on. Is can you get the right people into the right culture to do the right things at the right time? Excellent. All right, lightning round. Mike, how do you measure success in this environment? What's the most important thing about measuring success?
Customer happiness, satisfaction.
So you would measure satisfaction with your customers, and if they're getting what they need, you consider that a win.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Rob, what about you?
Two-part: customer satisfaction, employee engagement scores.
All right, so you would then work with your employees to look at whether it be emotional intelligence or whatever else you need to determine if they're engaging properly throughout the process?
Yeah, more research-based, and we'll see if we can continue to fund it, but we use the Gallup Q12, and that is very insightful on how engaged people are. Not necessarily happy, because that can be fleeting, especially during a pandemic, but whether or not they're resilient with their team and they're plugged into the organization and committed.
Excellent point. All right, one more lightning round. You ready? Rob, what's the last piece of advice that you want to leave everybody here about the future of work?
Shared journeys and define the hybrid environment that you have now and that you're transitioning to. That will define then a lot of the investments and actions that you have to take.
Great. Mike?
Yep. Focus on your purpose and use the automation and tools to get rid of the ministerial duties to do the real work.
Awesome. Gentlemen, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we're going to begin to wrap up. Audience, great questions. You really had some great questions. It was great to work with all of you. So Mike and Rob, thank you very much. I'd also like to give a big thank you for today's webcast for our sponsors: Amazon Web Services, Atlassian, Cisco, DocuSign, Elastic, NICE inContact, Pluralsight, and Red Hat for making it possible to have this important webcast today and discussion today with these two experts. I'd also like to thank our audience for spending time with us. Again, your questions were great. If you'd like to download your certificate of attendance, you can do so now by clicking on the certification icon at the bottom of the screen. Also, tune in with us on March 16th for our next conversation in this Future of Work series titled Staying Connected, the Collaboration Tools and Strategies that Can Unite the Government Workforce. So I just want to personally say thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for your questions. Everybody have a great rest of your day.